I've been to Dunedoo. It is a real place. It's in central western New South Wales. Yes. A few years ago, we got a question on the Ask John Mackay site, which you can look up. And it was the result of someone looking at the Biologos site and seeing an article about how the story of Noah's flood was just a theological story. Now, since then, they've written lots of other things, and that quote that we put up at the beginning there came from a 2023 article, but our question goes back to 2016. So they have been talking about this for a while. But the idea that the local flood is one that comes and goes quite regularly. So it's not a new idea. It's been around for quite a while, and it is used to challenge people who believe in the worldwide flood and who believe that God judged the entire world, not just a local region. Now, I do have some slides, but I'm going to have to skip over them. We sent out a newsletter this week, so I don't know whether you want to just do a bit of a diversion to remind people about our email newsletters. They have started up for 2024. We have some interesting things for you. They're a mixture of news and plus our watching brief on the general scientific news. So you'll read some interesting things about our experiments that we're doing up at Jurassic Ark. Fascinating things there about how to make your own oil, coal and gas. Joseph has been out in the wilds of Wales and has found some interesting fossils, and Craig has been out in the wilds of Tasmania and found some interesting fossils there as well. And we have an interesting report about crocodile skin, or, well, maybe not crocodile skin, but certainly the oldest reptile skin, because that is a claim that was made by some scientists who were digging up fossils in a cave system that had been infilled in Oklahoma. And it was dated as 289 to, I've got 289 again there. It should be 286. And they found a little fragment of skin, which when they looked at it was very, very clearly reptile skin. And because of the dating of these rock layers, they said, oh, look, we found the oldest reptile skin. And interesting, the surface of it just looked like living crocodile skin, but it also had some features of other reptile skin, such as snakes and lizards. Now, this is a serious issue because the evolutionists will tell you that reptiles evolved from amphibians, but amphibians and reptiles have completely different skin. And somehow they managed to jump over that transition without going into the details. But you can read about that in our newsletter. But basically, amphibians are designed to have a semi-aquatic life, so they have skin that is moist and helps them breathe. Reptiles are land-dwelling animals that reproduce on land, and they have skin that is designed to live in a dry environment. If this really was the oldest reptile skin, well, all it shows is that reptile skin has been reptile skin for as long as you want to believe it's been around on the earth. Our next story was about owls. We always like to see if we can find interesting stories about design, because there's just wonderful design out there in the real world. And one of the wonderful things about owls is that they are able to fly without making any noise. And some scientists and engineers decided, well, how do they actually do this? Now, previous studies had shown that they have these sort of fringes on the trailing edge of their wings. So some scientists and engineers decided, well, let's work out how this actually works. What is it that suppresses the noise? And in order to do that, they had to create a three-dimensional model. Now, that's in quotes there because it's from an article from a website called Interesting Engineering. Now, the original report in the scientific journal did not use the word created. In fact, you'll get banned if you use that word or the word creator. But engineers work out in the real world, and they know very well that three-dimensional models and machinery and all sorts of other things like that have to be created by intelligent people who have creative design skills. And they discovered how these trailing edge fringes actually work, and therefore we could use the same structure to design propellers, drones, and wind turbines. And if they manage to do that, it will only be because some clever engineers actually built something that was similar to the owl wings. So who was smarter in the first place? And then we have a story which is related to what we're talking about tonight, because we're talking about real worldwide things. Now, this was just a study of part of Australia, or the continental shelf just off northwestern Australia, where they're doing very detailed studies these days of the ocean floors, and they found the remnants of what was a complex terrestrial landscape, right, with rivers and freshwater lakes and an extensive archipelago. And the people who did this estimated, well, this sort of landscape could have supported up to 500,000 or 500,000 people. Now, that's most unlikely that many people lived in this area just northwest of Australia. And the population of Australia now is only a bit over 26 million. And when Europeans first came to Australia, there were people living here, but there was probably only 500,000 people in the entire continent. But it does remind us that all over the world, there is evidence that people have lived on what are now buried or undersea remains, so on the continental shelves. And this is an issue for people who believe in the worldwide flood of Noah, where only the animals and the people on the ark were saved. How did we get people all over the world now? How did we get animals all over the world? Well, if the sea levels were lower in the past, and the secular scientists don't disagree with that, in fact, they insist that the evidence is there that during the Ice Age, the sea levels were lower, significantly lower, and what are isolated islands now were either joined up or a lot closer to one another. So biologists scoff at the idea that the current population of people and animals in the world are descended from those that got off a boat somewhere near the Middle East and managed to migrate all over the world. Well, there's plenty of evidence that that happened, and the evidence that it was facilitated by much bigger forces that are happening now with the current climate change debate. It's all there. And so the more that we look under the sea, the more that we look on the land, the more evidence we find that the Bible is true. It can be trusted. And therefore, it is absurd for people who claim to be Christians and claim to believe in the scriptures to write things like this, that the scientific and historical evidence is clear that there never was a global flood. The scientific evidence and the historical evidence is very clear, and you've seen some of it tonight, and there's plenty more on our media and in our presentations. And this was the question we got back in 2016. Biologos stated that Noah's flood was only a local event and is only a theological story. Now, that's important, because unless only reality has authority. So if something was not really true, where it is described in a historical narrative in the Bible, if it wasn't really true, then it has no theological significance and no theological authority. Anyway, we were asked, what do you think? And we put together a detailed answer, which you can read. But there are 5 serious issues that need to be addressed. Now, we could go on and on and on about all of them. We'll probably come back to this topic a few times during the year, but these are the issues that we really do need to confront. What does Genesis state? The best way to answer that one is actually read those 3 chapters that Joseph read excerpts from, and see what the Bible clearly says It's not obscure. It's not difficult to read. It is a clear, detailed, sensible narrative. Now, then ask yourself, well, if it wasn't a worldwide flood, it had to be a local flood. Does it make sense? And in fact, it doesn't. And we do explain in the answer to that question how it's very illogical. If the local flood makes sense, it just becomes a sort of fanciful, silly story. God doesn't tell silly stories, he tells the truth. We need to take our authority from Jesus and the apostles. If you claim to be a Christian, a follower of Christ, then you have to follow his teachings. His word is true. And then we have evidence from cultures all over the world. And if you've been to some of our museums, particularly the one in Tasmania, and we have a new display coming up at the one in Brisbane, there is evidence from cultures all over the world that there was a worldwide flood. Now, sometimes the story has become embellished and bits of it have been left out and other bits have been added. That's what happens when people walk away from the truth of God's word. But the foundation there, that there was a worldwide flood set in judgment, is just there all over the world. And we also have the evidence from the earth, and that's what we've been showing you in this program here. You can actually go out and see the evidence in the rock layers, in the fossils, in the landforms. It's all there in the real world. God is the God of the real world. And if we can just come back to us, I have one of those fossils that supposedly or definitely did come from the highest mountain in the world, of course, being Mount Everest. Here we have a lovely lump of rock. And if we open it up, you can see here, if I can get my camera to get a decent look. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Right, that's an ammonite, a deep sea creature, and that was found on Mount Everest. So the evidence is there, out in the real world. We don't have to fear what the secular skeptics say about us. It's all there. God is the God of the real world.